Hi, everybody. Welcome to Prime Time for Women, the community, the platform where women connect, celebrate, and enjoy each other's company as they learn and explore new possibilities in the second half of life. It's so exciting for me today to be with Jen Silbert. And what I want to ask you is, do you want to fulfill your potential? If so, you're in the right place because Jen Silbert is a certified coach, a trainer, and health and wellness educator. She's the founder of Raw and Naked Living, and she's going to detail the skills that are necessary to live a courageous life. That's the beginning of everything. Jen's going to share her expertise, and if you listen, you will learn and have a chance to share your thoughts and explore your fears. So, Jen, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Hey, I'm glad to be here.
So we're going to do an 8-week exploration here. And the first week of Courageous Living is all about exploring the world of fear and courage as we experience it. So, I'm going to ask you to talk a little bit about what holds us back and how we can move forward.
Right. Well, you're just jumping right in.
I am.
And you're ready to just dive right in.
Well, I'm excited to hear this myself. So.
Well, and that's you. And I love that about you. And that is what we'll be doing in these next 8 weeks. But if I could set the stage for this, I want to, I love how you use the word explore several times in the introduction, because first off, am an explorer archetype. And it was so liberating to discover my archetype. I had done other personality tests before. There's the Myers-Briggs, there's 16 personalities, there's the Enneagram, and each of those test results contribute a little bit more to helping us to get to know ourselves. But I did a branding training when I started up my business, and that helped me to really pick out that name, Raw Naked Living. But when the results came out and I learned that I'm an explorer, and I read the description of explorer, I'm like, yes, that's me. Oh my God, I finally know myself, and I'm finally giving myself freedom to go off and chase this and go explore this, because that's...
Tell us what did it say? What is the definition of an explorer?
Oh, an explorer. Well, this, I can kind of share that, although it's not apples to apples, but typically an explorer is someone who is has a pioneering spirit, who has a strong sense of self-sufficiency, who has a strong independent streak, someone who is willing to scout out and is okay on their own, going ahead before the crowd. And Lewis and Clark had their own, they were explorers, and they had their own scouts. I think they probably had their Indian friends who were out there being scouts. I kind of see myself, living that pseudo pioneer spirit. But it also felt like it gave me permission to explore possibilities. And I like looking at big visions. I'm not the greatest at tying up loose ends and bringing them all to closure. And I remember being so hard on myself for so many years, because I'm like, I have these great ideas, but then it kind of became overwhelming, and I couldn't just tie them all together, tie them up with a knot. And when I discovered I had an explorer archetype, it freed me from almost the shame that I had felt, especially as I started my business. And I feel like I get off to a good start, and then I just can't tie up these loose ends. Well, now I recognize that I need to team with someone who can help me to tie up loose ends and make sure I'm not straying. And I've had to work at also better focus. But for those that are maybe doing a little ADD thing, maybe you too are an explorer archetype. And I got permission to go off on those tangents and not feel guilt or shame that I wasn't being focused. So,
And that's what you're looking to help other women explore. But in your work, you do a lot of, and I don't want to, if you're still setting the stage, I don't want to ask this
yeah,
next question. But as you did your work, you spent a lot of time coming to the realization that the real work begins once you really embrace your struggles and shine the light on fear. And that's why this program is called Courageous Living. So Jen, can you talk a little bit about some of the steps that you want, or some of the steps that are necessary to get to that point? How do we get to the point where we identify, what are the questions we ask ourselves to identify the fears that prevent us from living courageously?
very good. And this is where I'll go on for a little bit to kind of get to the foundation
Right.
that you set up so perfectly. One of the things that I had noticed by being more of a thinker is that when I looked at life, when I looked at challenges, when I looked at fears, I felt that all I had to do was to just muster through. And this kind of goes back to what we talked about in the navigating change session, where we talked about when the going gets tough, the tough get going. I had this mentality that all I had to do was just muster through and I could overcome those fears. So I mentioned in that session that I was very physically resilient and physically courageous. I could physically walk into anything. I had a couple stories where I was easily talked into at a bar over a couple beers, getting up in an airplane and going up 15,000 feet and jumping out of the airplane the next day without a problem. Hey, that's no problem. I can do that. Oh, a couple beers. Yeah, that'll take care of my fears, right? And as time went on, I found that as I got older and a little bit wiser and had more emotionally challenging situations, my fears were showing up largely in the context of relationships, because I wasn't as emotionally resilient as I was physically resilient, and I didn't have good coping skills for the conflict that comes up in relationships, like being rejected, being abandoned, being neglected, not having my needs met. And I had a lot of fear in the emotional realm. And I, being a more of a thinker and a right brain type, was finding that trying to muster through that and use force to overcome those fears was not working, because in the relationships, obviously that plays itself out as more controlling. And that's how I also became a perfectionist, which is another coping strategy to deal with fear, because it's another form of exercising control.
So when you're working with women through Raw and Naked Living,
Mhm.
so that's great because you modeled for us what fears you faced. How do you lead people? What are the questions how do you get them to recognize what's holding them back? I know one of the ways is to talk about your own experience, but everybody, I'm guessing, maybe I should ask this as a question, doesn't everybody have different thing that holds them back? And how do you get them to focus on themselves? So often we focus on what's outside, so we don't have to look at ourselves.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue into this section, because I keep referencing the right brain thinking for a reason. And that is because I was neglecting a very important part of my whole person that is usually your compass for uncovering your fears and really getting to know who you are. And that is your inner wisdom. And the only way to really get in touch with your inner wisdom is to spend quiet time with yourself and get honest. Get honest. Feel the feelings. and start from there. And what I would find is that when I would, I mean, this was such an epiphany for me, which is why I have a special affinity for working with women, especially overachieving women who on the outside look like they got this all together. They're badass. They're not afraid of anything. But oftentimes, it's not a general blanket statement, but oftentimes they're not maybe as in tune with in their intuitive side. And that intuitiveness is the wisdom that we need to tap into to understand where's that coming from. And it often isn't a journey you can continue without the guidance of someone to help you, because we've all had experiences, different kinds of experiences in our childhood that have contributed to this environment. Let me share an example of something I heard the other day that was so profound that it allowed me to better understand that, first off, I'm not the only one that's walked through this, but I, for a long time, had a fear of not being important. And my gosh, it's really been a rather recent revelation, epiphany. It's taken me years to understand the root of that, because I didn't really have that guidance. I was in counseling really on and off for a lot of years. And oftentimes it's because there was a relationship conflict. And I was in there going, I want that person to change. How can you help me make that person change? And I didn't really get someone to tell me that I needed to start from within. That's not where I wanted to start. I didn't really get all that guidance on how to start from within. And then as the years went on and we started unpeeling some of these layers, I discovered that, I have gravitated toward these kinds of jobs, these kinds of environments, because I wanted to feel important. Now, where does that come from? Okay, because when I would feel less confident if I was in an environment where I didn't feel important. Okay, now little children get that way, right? Or little toddlers, if they don't feel like they're important at the center of attention, what are they going to do?
Have a temper tantrum.
They have a temper tantrum. Okay, so that is the adult equivalent of that. Is we're controlling, we maybe express ourselves in unhealthy ways, we use unhealthy coping mechanisms. But if I could finish this thread real quickly, it's not uncommon for many of us to go into adulthood feeling like we're not important. And it's not because our parents intentionally neglected us, although in my family, I have my own circumstances, and you and I have talked because you come from a big family. It's probably hard to give your undivided attention to 9 kids, right?
Yeah, so like what we were talking about, we were saying there are some strengths that come out of living in a big family and not getting that all that feedback that you want. You develop other areas of resilience, but there also could be little traumas, right?
Yeah, and traumas, and you hit the nail on the head, because my circumstances, in truth, I never saw my growing up as a rather traumatic experience until the past 5 years, to be honest with you, because I always felt like, okay, everybody grows up with some kind of conflict. We all have our flaws. But then as I worked in it, it's taken me many years of intentional work to really get to the root of all of my fears. And some of it is going back to, let's look at our childhood. Now, no parent can really tend to all their children all of the time at the level we all want. However, you can say things like, you're important to me, but I have to tend to this person who's also important to me. So I will get back to you when I'm finished with that.
Right.
Now, think on how much of a difference that is for this child versus just saying, go away, I'm busy, I'm on the phone. And, we all get busy and we all get careless. But this was a chronic thing in my environment. And this is no blaming, because, as I mentioned in the Navigating Change, we can't give what we don't have.
Right.
And I have more empathy for my parents, who both grew up very scrappy and had their own trauma. And I've done a lot of forgiveness work. There's a lot of releasing, a lot of forgiveness. But so those emotional fears, I think, start by you sharing your story in a safe
So
environment.
yeah, and I want to make sure that I'm cognizant of your time. So I want to get to what you were talking with me earlier about how you lead women to what questions you ask them so that they can uncover what's blocking them. I mean, do you ask them about their childhood? Do you ask them about how they view themselves? What kind of questions do you put to them so that, because everybody's fears are a little different, aren't they?
Absolutely, but there's still a similar path that we can take to get to that space. And contrary to the work of a therapist, a coach usually isn't going back into the past to dig into that.
Okay, that's good.
Usually what we want to do is to start from where you are now and move you forward. And I love that. That's why I love being a coach, because having been through counseling myself for many years, I found there was a place for that. When you get to serious trauma, when you get to where you had serious dysfunction in your upbringing that is holding you back into adulthood and affecting your relationships and your self-worth, highly recommend that you do work with a good counselor. But there's maybe a small element of that we'll do in coaching if we find that there's a block, and that if I help you, I'm helping you to tap into your inner wisdom. And so what I'm doing is really acting as a mirror to reflect wisdom you already have by asking you questions so that you will begin to think. And maybe this allows you it opens a door.
That's great. I love that idea that you act as a mirror to reflect wisdom they already have. You know, that reminds me of something you were talking about a word that you don't like to use, and that is improve. Like you have to improve yourself. Could you talk about why you don't like that word and how that actually is counterproductive as we look to grow and explore new possibilities?
Absolutely. Well, that is one of my peeves, that word self-improvement. And the quick backstory is that I was on that self-improvement hamster wheel for way too long. And I know so many women who are in the same place. And oftentimes it comes up when there's some conflict in your relationship, in your marriage. And then it's like, okay, if I do this better, and I got to improve this, I got to fix this. So fix, improve. If
You're done.
Together, I will not let you use that word. I don't use that word because what that assumes is that you're broken and you need fixing. And when you improve on something, you will never end that process. It's like you cannot, there's nothing to fix about you. I want to reframe that thinking and have us look at using the word awareness. Okay, we're working on becoming more aware. We're working on becoming more enlightened, because if we use Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what's at the very top? That's the self-awareness and the self-enlightenment, right? And our path to get there is by seeing that we're meeting our basic needs first, and then working up the ladder and meeting all those needs so that we have a sense of completion, so that we can find our most enlightened self. And it's a journey. That's
Right.
the thing. When you fix something that's broken, it's fixed. We're never going to stop evolving if we are growing healthy. So yeah.
You know what, Jen, I love that. And you know, to me, this idea that you don't want to use the word improve because it focuses on our weaknesses. I like that you really work to identify people's strengths and use them to make them happy, as opposed to saying, fix this, what you're bad at. Let's look at what you're good at. And if you amplify that enough, then there's nothing left. There's no energy going into the weaknesses, right?
Yeah, thanks for adding that in, because that is it. Because we women are notorious for focusing on our weaknesses and the things that are wrong with us. I mean, that is the basis of a lot of fear, is that it's shame, it's guilt, it's feelings of not enough. I mean, those are all very common, legit fears that.
Can you talk a little bit about what are the most common fears that the women that you work with have experienced? And I ask that question not because I want to be nosy, but I want people who watch this video at a later time to know that they're not alone.
Oh, absolutely. Well, a feeling of not being enough of something is really it. I'm not enough. I'm not lovable enough. That's a big one. I'm not lovable enough, because a lot of the work I do is in the context of relationships. And
Mhm.
that's usually when we see those fears popping up. Because let's face it, sometimes when we're by ourselves, we're not we're rather independent. We can come and go as we please. We can have these quirky little habits and they don't have an impact on anyone, but now you're in a relationship with somebody. It could be as a parent, especially with you kids reach teens and they start getting more independent. And so there's more conflict. And now we're questioning our parenting skills. That's so common for moms, is to think I'm not a good enough parent. And some of the others are, geez, it's just not feeling worthy. Not just real. Those are probably going to be the biggest ones. It's just not feeling worthy, and that comes up a lot with women I've worked with who are they're constantly apologizing for just existing.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
actually was going to ask, that was one of my questions. I recently read an article that was advocating for not just women, but it kind of went through how I'm sorry has become a default expression in English language. And people use it all the time. And so it really doesn't have the meaning it used to have. And actually, the linguist that was writing this article said, I'm sorry can be translated into I failed. And that's not like, I'm sorry for what you're going through. It's like, I failed and it's my fault. And I thought that that was really interesting. And I was wondering if you think that that's true of the women you work with, if, you know, the sense that they need to apologize for everything. Somehow they're taking on the weight of the world.
right. Well, um, let's put this in context, because I do a lot of work with women in relationship who are having conflict in relationship. And I am a big proponent of stepping up. This is stepping into your courage to say, I'm sorry, to apologize. So that it is a courageous act to apologize. And those are two very powerful words that can quiet a conflict, is to take responsibility, and to the extent that it may be, now you may all not agree with this, but let's keep going with this.
Yeah, go ahead.
To the extent that it makes peace in your relationship. Okay. But when it becomes a default just to shut down a conversation that maybe needs to continue to happen, then it is dysfunctional. And it can also be a default that someone goes to when they just want to just shut you up, like you're like, all
Well,
right.
that's what this article was talking about, Jen, that they were saying, and I'm going to ask you this, what else can we say? And I'll tell you some of the things they said, but I'm going to pick your brain as a coach. Instead of saying, I'm sorry, what are some of the other tools that we can use?
Well, you can add, this is good. I'm glad we're having this conversation, because it demonstrates the importance of communicating with, not only with the right words, but also authentically. You know how I am. That's what Raw Naked is all about. It's all about showing up authentically. So I this is similar when we actually praise people, because we can overpraise, like we can overpraise our kids, and sometimes that is not healthy. But if you can single out something and refer to that specifically, it has more impact because it is constructive. So for
Instead of saying, oh, you're a good kid, you say, I like the way you shared with your brother or something
oh
like
yeah, I
that.
found that is very impactful, very impactful. And my kids remembered that, because I had a family member who was a wonderful cheerleader, but an overpraiser to the max. And for years, I was like, I don't know why this is bothering me. But every time the child would get overpraised, I'd want to step back to go, okay, let's be specific, and also, oh, you look so good, you look so good, and focusing so much on looks, I'm like, no, that's not a good, healthy thing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think when you focus on looks, especially when kids are little and they're adorable and cute, somehow what that translates when you're in your prime is you're not adorable, you're not cute, you're not even worthy of looking at.
Right.
And so I love that you're coaching women to say the appearance is not the essence, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when it comes to apologizing, first off, how this fits into our courage conversation is that some of the most courageous words you can say are "I'm sorry." But it's because I'm sorry puts you in a very vulnerable state. And that's the foundation of courage, is being okay being vulnerable. Because what that means is that you're stepping into a fear. You could say, I'm sorry, and the person won't accept your apology. They might talk back at you and say, well, you don't really mean that, or I don't really care about your apology. And then we'll go further then in looking at how are you going to respond if someone doesn't accept your apology, because that is like you showing up naked and someone just, laughing at you, if I can use that analogy. So I feel it's one of the bravest acts we can do is to step up and apologize. And there isn't enough of that. But if it becomes overused and it's just to placate someone, then it's not authentic. So it's a disingenuous apology.
Yes. So the this article written by a linguist, so it's a little different than a life coach experience. But one of the things they were saying was, if somebody comes and is mad at you and is looking for you to apologize, instead of going to the default, there were some different suggestions. They said one of them was, I hear what you're saying, and I'm going to give that some more thought.
Yes.
I'm going to think about what you said and get back to you. You know what? I haven't thought of it that way before. Have you ever thought of it that way? Give them a chance to not just express the anger, but to express the feelings behind or the reality behind. So all these things, I was like, I'll be damned. I mean, that's kind of not something that I've done, but I thought it was worth asking you about, because I hadn't heard that before.
And let's put this into perspective to talk about why sometimes that is hard to do, on top of the fact that we don't really default to that kind of language. Because what's happening, and this is kind of getting to the root of our fear, and that is the programming. Our brains are wired to get on the defensive when we feel we're being threatened. And that is the root of our fear. And we're biologically wired that way. And so we have to work at intentionally rewiring our brain to stay calm when we get triggered, when someone says something that maybe sounds threatening, maybe it's false, and it puts us on alert, because our response in that situation is more to defend ourselves. And so we're less empathetic to the other person. And so if you're going to use that language to say, I didn't really think about that before, that's you being nice and calm and mature and ideal, and being a little empathetic in acknowledging that they have a valid point.
Right. And that was the whole thing. Instead of just go, I'm sorry, is what they're really looking for is a sense that they're not crazy, that they deserve to be seen and heard. And that's something that we talk about all the time in Prime Time for Women. But I also liked it. It was like not taking everybody else's, like, I'm not the one that's the root problem of everything. And too many women take on everything, everybody's issues, and they bring it into their bodies, and they're responsible for everything. And I think that that's one of the things as a coach, you help women, you empower them to change what they can change and to step into their fullness, right?
Great. Well, it's going to start up here. So if someone found themselves in this situation, this is the part I talk about, the importance of stepping back and being still. And I'm a big proponent of journaling. I know many women just start their day and they're, I've worked with a number of them. I love their honesty. I'm like, oh, I get up and I'm just ready to roll. I got to check my emails, got to get off to work. But first thing in the morning, last thing at night is just a perfect time to create some stillness where you can listen to that inner wisdom and think about whatever it is that triggered you. And that's what we do. You want to take note of whatever's triggering you in the moment and then write it up. Okay, what happened? So you want to look at the circumstance. What happened? Somebody said something. I worked with a woman who had said that because she was very physically conscious of her body, which goes back to her upbringing and being shamed a lot, when she would go out in public and people would look at her, it would trigger that feeling of insecurity. There was still that fear there. And it didn't matter that they laughed at her or just looked at her because she felt the same. So we want to step back and notice, okay, the time that I feel this fear is when I go out in public and someone looks at me.
Mm-hmm.
So let's now take a look at, where's that coming from? What are you feeling? Oftentimes it's shame, it's embarrassment, because I don't like how I look, and it goes back to childhood. And that's where, as a coach, I will introduce a bit of that background from the upbringing, because to move forward, oftentimes we have to heal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The healing is just acknowledging that when I feel this feeling, it has protected me from this wound that goes back to childhood. And now it's safe for me because I'm a big girl now. And I'm going to take charge of protecting this little girl so she's not going to be hurt anymore. So now what we would do is we would reframe that thought. So we'd write that down and we would work on that fear. Now, what other thought are you going to put in your head when you feel triggered like that again? And it's going to
So it's a little bit of not just saying I have to let this go, but it's inviting more positive thoughts in too, right?
It's all of what it is, because we have to take charge of those thoughts, because our body is subconsciously trained to default to the old thought. You have to intentionally reframe that thought. And this is a concept and we call this mindset and reframing our thoughts. This is something that a personal trainer is probably going to use, a nutritionist, any space you're in where you want to change an old habit. We're oftentimes dealing with this baggage and belief system. So no matter what you're going into and trying to do, you're going to want to re-examine the fears that you have that prevent you from moving forward. And that's always going to come down to some kind of fear.
So Jen, I have been taking some notes and I want to do a little recap on here of all the important highlights that you shared so far. And then if you want to give specific, I think you had mentioned that you had an assignment that you were going to give to our viewers. I wanted to give you the chance to talk about that. So here are my takeaways from all the wise things you said today. You let women know that they're not broken. And you use the idea of reframing the word improve yourself to become aware of who you are. You become enlightened. You try to act as a mirror that already shows reflecting the wisdom that they already have. that as a coach, you start from where women are and seek to help them move forward. You said that we can't give what we don't have, and you're looking to help women realize that they already have it so that then they can share it. Two other things you said that in order to journey forward, it requires us to step back and create stillness in our lives, that we need to move forward to heal, and that journaling is a tool that really helps in that process. So, you know, as I listen to you today and think, I hope that all the women who hear this come away with their own takeaways. And in case they don't, I wanted to share mine, but I also wanted to give you a chance to talk about journaling, because you brought that up, and I know that that's something you had wanted to share with the women today, and maybe invite them when we get back together the next time to share some of those journals.
Right. And
did I catch all the important things?
Oh, good. You're such a great note taker.
I'm a good listener.
You're a good listener. And so thank you. Listening is going to be a concept we're going to probably weave throughout the next 7 weeks. And it is an integral aspect of our growth in cultivating more courage and overcoming fear. And it's not just listening to others around us and listening better, but also listening more to ourselves and
Right.
tapping into that inner wisdom. So let's, I guess, as we come to wrap this up, and I'm going to share a little exercise as well as an
assignment.
Homework?
No, we don't want to say homework, because
that's why I was looking for another word for homework. I said no assignment,
an exploration. I don't know.
You got yes, I know that exploration. Well, if you're moving forward, you've got to have so our navigation. So this is like our navigation to go. I want to use a lot of explorer words in this. Some of the tools, and I say toolkit. I even like to say backpack, because we're on a trip, right? We're on a journey. So tools to put in your backpack here would be journaling. And I will give you a few journaling prompts before we end. And that allows you to start examining what you're feeling. What are those feelings? And then as you continue to journal, you'll start noticing patterns. And as you start using more tools, you will see that maybe you will start hijacking some of these unhealthy patterns, and then you'll start feeling so confident that you're seeing results, which could mean things like in the past when someone said something to you that would shut you down for weeks, that you'd be ruminating over this thing someone said to you, and you would lose a lot of emotional what's the word I'm thinking of? It just a lot of time in getting mired. You might find yourself drifting off to those thoughts. So you've like stolen space from your brain where you could have been thinking about more joyful things. So you hijack these patterns, you'll notice you're recovering quicker. And now you're not ruminating as long, until maybe it gets to a point where now this is like, I've got my rain jacket on, and this is just like rolling right off my back, and it's not even affecting me anymore. That's the vision.
So when we have our backpack, we put a journal in it, and we also put a raincoat in it.
Yeah, your raincoat, exactly, because that's kind of like your armor. So you're putting a raincoat on because you want to start letting things just like roll off your back. That's our goal. And eliminating fears are so that rain jacket can be like your coat of courage. Okay, whatever other visualization you might want. Visualizations are super powerful, and I'm going to give you one before we leave. And then meditations, that's a part of
Is that different than visualization?
You can do a visualization meditation, but there are many different forms of meditation, which is about bringing you back into the moment so that you are letting go of, you're creating space to just get a break from those thoughts.
Yeah,
of fear.
I did want to just share one thing since you talked about meditation.
Okay.
Dr. Vivian Brown on Sunday spoke about a research project where adults who embarked on an 8-week course of meditation, it was very programmed. In 8 weeks, they could visualize changes in the brain, the centers of the brain that are connected to emotion were bigger. There was more cross-hemispheric connections. And so I have to say, I've been one of those people like, yeah, meditation. I'm going to start it.
Well, I'm going to give you a visualization before we end, but and one more tool in there are affirmations. So
Affirmations, okay.
are declarations. These are the intentions that we're going to set each week before we get started. We're making an affirmation of some sort, and I'm going to just encourage everyone to create their own and not dictate what affirmation we should have before we walk in, because it could be different. Every one of us is dealing with a different fear. But an affirmation is a declaration of intention. And it is very powerful when you can speak this. And it's not just this woo-woo. I'm not into all of the positive psychology stuff, because some of that is a little disingenuous. This is, if you just speak happy things and you're going to be happy all the time. No, but this is a declaration. We see this in our holy books. There are declarations everywhere in those books that are powerful. And if I can just parlay some of these tools into my cancer journey and how I use them as I was working through cancer, I woo-wooed some of this stuff as well until I discovered that my healing may totally rely on how much I'm going to bring to the table versus just relying on my doctor and there wasn't a pill I could pop to just make me better. And there wasn't a guarantee that the treatment was going to work, which is what it's like. We're hearing this now, even with the vaccine, right? There's no 100% guarantee with any medicine that's going to work. And chemo doesn't work for everyone. And it's scary because you walk into it not knowing, is this going to work? But you can talk yourself out of healing very easily. You can talk yourself into being sick. I've seen this happen. Okay. So you could talk yourself into healing. And I listened to visualization meditations that had me actually visualize light coming into my body. It went so far as to imagine what my cells look like. What does a healthy organ look like? It's nice and pink, right? It's healthy. And if the cancer had damaged these organs, then I would visualize these little scrubbers, this little army of little scrubber men that were coming into my body, going in through my veins, and they were going up to my organs and in my veins, and they were scrubbing and scrubbing and scrubbing. And I just sit there for 15, 20 minutes, visualizing them just totally scrubbing my organ until it looked nice and pink. And I felt, and I have read of accounts of people actually healing themselves from pretty serious disease through the power of visualization. So I want to kind of end on that note, if I could.
Okay, that'd be great.
That maybe takes, could take us a few minutes to work through this. But if I may, I want to show you how you can use visualization to deal with a fear. So the first thing is that we're going to quiet ourselves, and we're going to use deep breathing, by the way, is another form. So here's what I am going to have us do. And next time we might actually start our session this way, because we want to just kind of get into that space. So we want to quiet down. So what I want to ask you to do right now is to close your eyes and slow down your breathing and start breathing deeply in through your nose. And we're going to do some diaphragmatic breathing. So we're not breathing in from the chest, we're breathing in from the diaphragm. So as you breathe in, your diaphragm is expanding. You're going to hold your breath just a few seconds, and now you're going to release through your mouth. So you're deflating your diaphragm. You're going to keep that up. This is essential for calming so that we can get into the quiet space and embrace a visualization that will actually work. And while you do this, I want you to sit up straight. I want you to put your head up and your shoulders back. I want you to plant your feet on the ground. You're still breathing through this. I want you to own the space that you're in. So you're stretching yourself up, which is a confident pose in and of itself. I'm worthy. I own this space. You can even take your socks and shoes off and put your bare feet on the ground so that you're really feeling grounded. Now, I want you to bring to mind a fear that is the first to come to mind for you right now. What is that fear? Maybe it's something that happened to you recently, and so that fear is very obvious. You can bring that to mind. It might be something that isn't so obvious, but it could be a fear that has been a companion of yours for many years. I want you to create a vision of that fear, and it could just be the word, a word. It could be that you conjure up an image. It could be something dark. And even though your eyes are closed, I want you to imagine that you are looking at this image that represents your fear. It might be a person that has hurt you, harmed you. It might be a big black cloud, however you want to visualize that fear. But I want you to bring it to your vision so that even though your eyes are closed, you are looking at this vision. And I want you to just stare it down without any emotion. And what we're going to do is we're going to release this fear by using this technique. We're going to imagine, and if you want to use your hands to do this, you can do this, or you can just visualize this image from the bottom to the top. We're going to gradually do this. We're going to pretend that we are turning this into a cyclone, okay? From the bottom to the top, you can use your hand, and as if you were wrapping yarn around it, like in a conical shape, starting from the bottom, working up to the top, working in circles, creating this cyclonic type of experience. And imagine the energy that you are building up as you wrap this fear around and around and around, and you work your way all the way to the top. And now you see, you can even use both hands, and you are wrapping this fear around. Oh, now you've reached the top. And now this ball of energy is in your hands. All that power. Okay, it's all wrapped up, and now you're going to wrap it up into a ball in your hand, and you're going to cast it out with force. You're going to just release that into the stratosphere. Whoops, and you're going to let it go. And you can reinforce this by, in your next breath, just gushing out through your mouth. And I'm releasing that fear. And I'm going to just take in a nice deep breath. There's a lot of energy that was involved in that process. You might even feel a little bit of emotion here. You might start feeling some tears coming to your eyes. And you can create your own language, something that you want. You don't have to say anything, but if you want to release that fear, you can create an affirmation. It says, I release my fear of unworthiness. I release my fear that this person is going to hurt me anymore, and I let it go. I release you, and then you can just slowly begin to open your eyes again. Whoosh. I'm actually feeling that. I'm actually feeling a little bit of that. But just like some of the other techniques maybe you're more familiar with, where you write down a hurt or a transgression in release therapy or in forgiveness therapy, and then you go out and you light it on fire. Okay, that's another exercise of releasing. Another is you put it in a balloon and you blow up the balloon, you let the balloon go. But from an environmental standpoint, I'm not big on like letting balloons go and then it just pops somewhere else. But it's a great visualization technique because it allows you to take control of that fear. You've now wrapped that fear around with the force of all this cyclonic energy, which is amazingly powerful, and then let it go. You may need to come back and revisit that periodically, but it can be part of the journaling where you write down, that you're releasing. And I find that these visualizations are really powerful. So
thank you for that, Jen. That was really lovely. Because these are recorded, and I'm not sure everybody would want to share their fears, but that is something that I am going to put your contact information in the chat so that people can reach out to you if they'd like to do that. And then I also, why I do that, I was wondering if you wanted to talk about the journaling
yes,
assignment as opposed to homework.
exactly, assignment. The journaling challenge. Why don't we make it a challenge? This is your
that's good. I like that.
Journaling challenge. We all like challenge. First off, I always promised too that I would end with a word of wisdom, and I will, since this is the first week and it's really just in setting the stage for the other. We're going to kind of like unpeel the different areas of courageous living in the following weeks. Next week is the courage to change, and that's a big one. That's critical to growth, but it's also very hard. But think about this. Without fear, there can be no courage. So when we look at cultivating more courage, we acknowledge that there was fear in the first place, right? So there's no courage without fear. Kind of sounds like a backwards. It sounds a little difficult to decompress, but when we get to that space where we have no more fears, we are living in our courage. Okay, then we can maybe say we've arrived, but we always evolve. So we're evolving, which is why not to the word of self-improvement, because we're evolving. But what I want you to do is I'm going to give you a challenge and give you a few questions to ponder for this week. If you are on this journey of discovering your fears and cultivating more courage, I'll give you a couple things to think about. Number one, I want you to step back and journal. How has fear held you back in your life? How has fear held you back? What does that fear look like in your life? That's going to give you pause for thought. You'll need some quiet time, and I think this will evolve over time. It might not be so easy to bring that to light right away. I also want you to recall a time in your life where you felt brave. We don't want to just focus on when we were afraid, because we all were afraid of something. Just like we focus on our strengths more than our weaknesses, we acknowledge that we have these fears, but we want to also, especially for those of us that don't feel we can be brave, that we weren't born brave. People are born with different levels of brave, but we all have the capacity to be brave. And we'll be talking about that too, cultivating habits of courage every single day so you can strengthen those muscles. So, and then as we go on, we'll look at what steps we can take each day to step into that fear and step into our brave.
So that is so great. So this week, exploring the worlds of fear and courage, and next week it's about exploring the courage to change on week 2. And Jen, there will be an opportunity, I guess, for people if they're interested in sharing some of their journals, but it's not required, right?
It isn't at all. And if you so feel called to do that, then do that. If you feel like you're in a safe space, and it is very liberating to share your fears, because now they don't own you anymore. So I want you to think about stepping into your brave by sharing, although there is no pressure at all to do that. It may help you to move forward in that journey. And that is part of us healing as well, is owning our story, including our shame. I want to give just a book recommendation before we start, because there are a lot of books that I would say will be a great place to start. I did this one last time in our Navigating Change, which is The Gifts of Imperfection by Brene Brown. I'm a big Brene Brown follower. And the last one I just got from her is Dare to Lead. And we're going to be talking about the courage to lead later on in these series as well. But yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Jen. I'm looking forward to week 2. I did want to ask you a question, if it makes sense to do outside of our presentation, which is going to be on our website, to do a group for people to share their journals, just as a Zoom call that's not publicized. Is that something that we could do?
Love it.
Okay.
That offers us that very space we often don't get, which is that we're heard. And that's
right.
What you do so wonderfully in Prime Time for Women. I think it just would tie right into your mission, is to help women be heard. That's so profoundly transformational, because oftentimes even those we love don't really know what to do with our story. And, you know, they're like, oh, I really feel, but I don't know what to say. And so we clam up and go, that's it, I can't talk to anybody. I'm afraid to share my story and my fear.
Well, I think what I'll do next week, when I send out the link to join this week 2, Cultivating Courage to Change, is invite people to let us know if they'd like to have that private space. And I won't assume that that's what people want to do, but I want to reiterate what Jen so beautifully and powerfully has said about the importance of being seen and being heard. But we also want to do it in a safe environment. So thank you, everybody, for watching this video. Thank you to Jen for sharing her wisdom and knowledge. And we'll look forward to seeing you on week 2.
And thank you for hosting this, Bernadette.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Thanks, everybody. Bye.